Console applications are in the toolbox of most system admins and command line enthusiasts. They work great in batch files and IT scripts. In this video, I'll show you some debug tips for working with console applications. Before I do, let's look at a couple of console applications available in the Windows command shell. I'll bring up my Start menu and then type in CMD. And I'll use this command prompt. I'll start by looking at this application, the Power Config. When I type in the name of the console application and press enter, nothing happens except an error message. The author of this application says that they need extra information in order to run the application. So they're telling me that I can type in Power Config. I'll hit the up arrow and type in / and get a list of parameters. And the way the parameters work in this application is you use a / and then the name of the parameter. So let's try one. Up arrow again. I'll use the list parameter. This gives me a list of the power configurations that are available on my desktop computer. The author of this application knows what to do when it sees / list, and it'll print out this information. Now let me show you another utility you've probably used, the ping utility. And this time when I press enter, instead of saying it can't work and I need to use the / it gives me a list of the parameters. I still need a parameter, but this time it gives me a list. And you can see it uses a different syntax. It uses a hyphen and usually a single letter. This is what I'm going to attempt to run. What this does is ping that IP address or this domain name 6 times. So again, the author of the ping utility knows how to read an IP address or a domain name here without a parameter name, and then it knows how to use hyphens and parameter names, and in this case, an additional piece of information, the number 6, which is passed in as part of this N parameter. You can do the same thing in your applications. Visual Studio and VB and C# support command line parameters, and what I'm going to show you is some debug tips to make it easy to get these parameters. This is the application I'll be using for my demonstration, pixelsmithart.exe. I'll start by showing you this from the command prompt. So I'll need to go to this folder. It's on my desktop. So I'll say change directory, paste in my path, and then I'll do dir. This is the executable that I want to run. So I'll type in pixelsmithart, and then the parameters I need are the image name equal, and then a space, and then the color / color equal red. So what this application does is it opens up this image file, this PNG file, reads all the information in it, turns it into ASCII art, and then outputs it to the console with the color that I specify. I'll maximize this window while it's thinking. It takes a little while to parse the pixels. There you go. I'll scroll up to the top. You can see my robot head there. I'll press the enter key to terminate the application, and then the up arrow. And I can change the color, or I can change the image, or both. I'll change the image to, I have a picture of a whale. And I'll change the color. Let's see, what color do I feel like? How about yellow? Maximize the window again while it's thinking. It's hard to see the whale. There's the spout of the whale. Okay, here's the point though I want to make is when it's time for me to test this application, I have to go and add these parameters. And it's tedious for me to go out to the command prompt, compile my application, go out to the command prompt, find my executable, run it, and pass it the parameters. I'd like to be able to use those parameters automatically in Visual Studio. Here I am in Visual Studio. I'll start by putting a breakpoint in this module 1. This is a Visual Basic application, but all the principles I show here work in a C# application too. I'll start by putting a breakpoint in my main method here. And then I'll press F5 to run the application. So everything you've learned in this course about how to work with breakpoints and use the debug windows works for console applications. We hit our breakpoint. I can step through my code pressing F10 or F11. I can move back to a previous line of code. All the debug windows, the watch windows, they all work like you'd expect. So the only difference here is how do we get those command line parameters into the application? Well, the way you do it in your code is in your main method, you have an array. This is how you do an array in Visual Basic. This contains those parameters. Now, where are those parameters coming from? I'm glad you asked me that. Stop the application. I'll open this My Project node inside my project. In C#, it's just called Project. And then I'll go to the Debug section and look at this area here, command line arguments. So whatever I type in here is loaded into that string array every time you debug the application. So you press F5, it compiles the application, starts it up, attaches the debugger, then passes in these arguments. So I can change these values. Let's change this to the whale picture. Like that. I'll save my work, and then I'll run the application. Let me take out that breakpoint. I'll take that out. And after a short wait, my application runs with the correct parameters passed in to my ASCII art generator. That brings me to the end of this topic. Before I go, let me point out that it's not just console apps that can take command line parameters. For example, you can run Office apps or Visual Studio with additional parameters. This technique I showed you for using parameters in the debugger also works with WPF and Windows Forms applications.